Hey everyone, how is it going? Welcome to the second installment of Big Goals, Little Steps. If you haven't seen the first one, I will put a link to it. It's also going to be really easy to find on my channel. It's the last video that I made before this. So if you haven't watched that last video, the whole point of this series that I'm doing, it's really unscripted. It's super kind of off the cuff, but as the name suggests, it's basically a way for me to document the little steps that I'm taking to work towards the big goals that I have. Now, this is particularly for my small business that I am starting from the ground up with no experience, no background. And so this is really kind of me showing what that looks like for me. I find this kind of stuff really helpful, and I think there are other people who might as well. So anyway, today I am filming this from a hotel room. If you follow me on Instagram, you'll know that I have been on a work trip for this week, and so that's thrown some of my Peppo Studios stuff off, but here we are. I'm doing this anyway because I still am keeping the ball rolling with my business side of things. So if you're not familiar, Peppo Studios is my current little itty bitty baby business. It is based in the watercolor world. That's where it started, with watercolor pet portraits. But I have these big goals and these big dreams of moving past that and into kind of the world of licensing. That's my big dream. In particular, I'm focusing on this surface pattern design, textile design kind of side of things. And for me, I don't think I've said this on here before really, but I'll document it here. For me, I'm really looking into the paper goods side of that world. I'll do a whole separate video at some point, one of these days, about kind of my business goals, visions, background, all of that. But that's not going to live in these Big Goals, Little Steps videos. So I mentioned in my video last week that I think that these videos are going to be a little bit shorter than what I filmed last week. Last week I had a really big picture overview of my 2023 goals, and then I broke it down into my 2-week goals. Now going forward, I think my plan for these videos is going to be first a recap of the past 2 weeks. Did I achieve the goals that I set? And then looking forward to the next 2 weeks to say, what are those next goals that I have for myself? So to get us started, I just want to begin by going through the goals that I set for the first 2 weeks in the series. Now, the dates don't really matter, but for me, that was January 16th through the end of the month. The first goal that I set myself was just to finish the patisserie paintings that I started. So I did that. I can show you some pictures of those. I posted, I'm actually currently in the process of posting those on Instagram. They were all over my stories, but I did finish those patisserie paintings. So that's great. They were really fun to do. They came from like a moment of inspiration. I was at work and just thinking about this patisserie, and I was like, I just really want to paint it. And I did, and it was great. And I finished a set of 6 paintings. So that's great. Now, a kind of second goal that I had set for myself, kind of related to this first one for the past 2 weeks, was to create 3 patterns using the paintings that I made. So I guess I can tell you, in addition to those 6 patisserie paintings, I also painted 2 baguettes. I was really feeling the food, the French baked good kind of subject. So anyway, combined, I had the baguettes to work with and the 6 pastries. So I have something to say about this goal here. So I did do this. I did make some patterns using these paintings that I made, and I didn't love them, and that's okay. That's why I'm doing this. That's why I'm in this early stage of like figuring out my style, figuring out what I like, and this is one that I did not like. And I think I've realized that I'm kind of at a crossroads in a couple of ways with my style and my kind of vision for what I want to create, because when I paint like one-off, like a subject, like I did with all of those paintings, I definitely lean towards the realistic side of things. I loved painting the bread. I think they turned out really beautifully. I was really proud of them. But when I translated all of these into pattern form, I did not love the way that they looked. A couple of times I've seen people create patterns out of like photographs of stuff, and I just think it looks out of place. And like, that's the realm. Not to say that my art is like good enough to look like it's a photograph. It's not. I'm not at the photorealism like level. But it was getting into that realm of like, it just didn't look quite right as a pattern. That's what I thought. I can show you here my favorite pattern that I made from this collection was with just the baguettes, just the bread. And this is something I could envision as like a gift wrap or some kind of other paper good, you know, on like a notebook or, you know, I don't know, something like that. I liked the way that that one looked. It's pretty simple with the white background and it was nice. And this is actually vectorized, so this was done in Illustrator. So I vectorized these images. Now I tried to do a similar thing with all the pastries and the breads and everything, and it was okay. I didn't love it. And like I said, I think this is just because of the style of painting that I was using. I learned some stuff too about like how I wanted to create the layout in my pattern and everything. And I don't hate the way it turned out, but it's not great. And I tried this with two different background colors. I tried a white background and then like a blue background. And it's okay. I don't know. I tried a couple days later. I was like, okay, what I like about the bread one is that it was spaced out. I do want to get good at like the busier pattern, but for right now, just like the simple pattern with like the clean background, I don't know. It was kind of nice. So I was like, all right, let me take that and I'll try one of my other pastries and I'll play with like background texture or just like shapes or something to make the background interesting. And it did not work for me because it was my first time ever trying it, and it didn't look good, and that's fine. And that was really because I was like, okay, this is too like three-dimensional looking or something. It was weird. It didn't look great. But I think that was really valuable for me because like, yeah, that was my goal, to make 3 patterns, and I made more than 3. Like 4 or 5, and I only really liked one of them, and I learned a lot about my style. And so after doing that, I was kind of like, okay, I think my favorite pattern I've made so far of mine is using these ice cream paintings that I did in like 20 minutes last year. It was literally just like blah 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 different colors and like move on to the next one, and it didn't have any intricate details or anything like that. So I really liked that looser look in the pattern. So I was like, okay, I think that's interesting to note and see how I can incorporate that going forward. So anyway, that was a comment about my patterns. Okay, the next goal that I had for the past 2 weeks was to complete the branding questionnaire. So in case you missed that, I started conversations with a designer who does branding for creative businesses, and she has like an onboarding questionnaire to make sure you're all a good fit and everything like that, and see your vision and all of this stuff. So it was on my goals to finish that questionnaire, and I did that. That's great. And I actually have gone a few more steps with this goal, in that we actually have started the onboarding process for me as a client, which is super exciting. So this is an investment for my business because, you know, I'm paying somebody else for their time and their experience, and they're really good at something that I'm not good at. I really tried to do my own branding, and it was so hard. It was something I struggled with so bad. So I'm happy to be able to support somebody else who is great at this kind of stuff. So I'm really, really excited to see where that goes. I'll talk more about that in my goals for the next couple of weeks, but I did go kind of beyond my initial goals for the last 2 weeks. That's great. Okay, my last goal for the past 2 weeks had to do with my website. My first part of that goal was to finish watching the Building a Squarespace Site from Start to Finish, the BASFA series on YouTube. And I did that. I actually watched it twice, I think, and it's super helpful. But I think that you really need to do it on your own to understand like what's going on. So that's kind of what I've been doing too. A sub point of that goal for the last 2 weeks was to transfer my domain over to Squarespace, and I haven't done that one yet. So that's the one goal that I didn't get to. But instead, really what I've been doing is like when you start Squarespace, you get kind of a free trial for I think it's 2 weeks. And so I've been playing around with like building a pretend website using some of the skills highlighted in that BASFA series. And that's where I am now. It's like super early stages in that. It's really for me just to figure out like how the functionality of Squarespace works, like if I like it, and I think I do. So yeah, I do think I'm going to keep going forward with that. And, you know, stay tuned because I'll have more to say about that. Okay, so those were my status updates on my goals for the past 2 weeks. So now I'm going to get into the goals that I have for the next 2 weeks going forward. So my first goal is to finish a new kind of series of paintings and patterns. So I'm going to take the lessons that I learned from the previous 2 weeks about that like kind of three-dimensional realistic looking painting and try to do something more loose, more two-dimensional and less intricately painted and everything like that. So I actually have already gotten a little bit of a head start on this, but my vision for this is to create a giraffe design. Giraffes are my favorite animals. I love them a lot. So I really wanted to use them in a design. I have been watching a few Skillshare classes, like a good number of them. I mentioned Mel Armstrong in my last video, and I'll mention her again because I've been really loving her classes. She has a bunch on there. So I shared a little bit about this on Instagram, but I actually tried to use a traditional repeat, meaning you create the repeat like on paper. I can show a picture of what that looks like. But so I tried that technique, and then I tried some of the techniques that Mel teaches about in her classes to digitally paint your hand-drawn images, basically, because that's something I've never done. I know a lot of people do that, and so that's something I wanted to try. And so I'm in the process of that, and that'll be one of my goals for the next 2 weeks, is to like finish that. And then I'm also doing basically the exact same pattern, but hand painted, using that looser two-dimensional style. I have this right here. Actually, listen, it's not going to be anything crazy and wild, but that's the whole point, right? So they're not done yet, but I brought this with me on my work trip where I am right now. And I'm just doing this in the evening sometimes. Like, it takes me like 5 minutes to do one of these because I'm not sketching it or anything. I just look at the paper and I'm like, blah, 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 draft. And that's how I painted those ice cream ones that I really love. So I'm going to try it and we're going to see what it looks like. So goal number 1 is to finish those giraffe patterns both digitally and using the watercolor version, and kind of compare them side by side, see what I like, see what techniques I like better, see how the end results compare. So it's really like a testing the waters kind of thing for me, just to play with these different techniques. So that's goal number 1. Okay, goal number 2 is to continue with the website building. As I mentioned, I started a free trial with Squarespace. So that Squarespace free trial will expire in the next 2 weeks. So my goal is to kind of commit to that and purchase that domain on Squarespace and figure out still at this point what that means to transfer my domain over from GoDaddy to Squarespace. And I think part of that is going to be to continue playing with the structure of the website to see how it all works. And I think something I might do is pick some potential branding colors. Of course, this is something I'm going to be working with the designer that I'm hiring. It sounds so fancy, but I'm going to be working with her to pick actual brand colors, and like she's got some cool, funky, like unusual color combinations that I think are going to be better than what I'm just going to come up with on my own. But regardless, I think that doing a kind of test run of what applying branding to a website would look like is going to be really helpful for me. And so I also know that like my first attempt at creating a website isn't going to be the best, most beautiful thing ever. And so I think it's good to do a dry run with like my non-finalized stuff. So, and I know it's not final ever, like you can always keep changing and updating it, and that's great too. So that's goal number 2, is to continue updating my website and stop that free trial of Squarespace and move into the paid version of it. Okay, my final goal for the next 2 weeks is to complete all of the onboarding tasks for the designer I'm working with for my branding. So that there's a bunch of things that involves. She's actually created a whole Notion kind of dashboard for branding, which I'm super excited about because I've been meaning to get on Notion and like really start using Notion for a while now, for like a year now. So I'm glad to have the excuse to just do it at this point. So she has a good amount of onboarding. I have actually already paid the first invoice, which is great. So I'm locked in now. But this is where I have to do a little bit more soul searching on like what I really want my brand to be. Like I really need to be thinking about all the hard questions, like who am I targeting? What are my tone words for my brand? Like what's the energy or the vibe that I want to give off with my brand? And of course, this can grow and change over time. And like my vision would be to continue working with the designer that I'm working with over time as like my brand grows and I continue to like get to know it better and everything like that. But I just needed to start, and I'm really excited about doing that. Okay, so those are my goals for these next 2 weeks. As a recap, it's to finish those giraffe paintings, both digitally and physically, including the patterns that are going to go along. I'm not setting a certain number of patterns I'm going to make. We'll just see what that looks like. It's really a way for me to test a couple of different techniques. My second goal is to keep building my website. So that means start the actual paid version of Squarespace and play with some like kind of pretend early stage branding on that website just to see how that works and what that looks like. My third and final goal for the next 2 weeks is to finish all the onboarding stuff for the brand work that I'm doing with a designer. So that's coming up soon, and I'm really excited. Okay, so my goal list is not super long for the next 2 weeks. To be honest, I have a pretty busy couple of weeks coming up with a decent amount of travel and work stuff and social stuff and whatever coming up. So it's gonna be busy, but I really love having these goals to like have a thing that I'm working towards every single day. Even if it's only for 5 minutes a day, I really like to make forward progress on all of these. So thank you for joining me for this second installment of Big Goals, Little Steps. I can barely even say it, and I came up with a name from my own brain, so I don't know why I did that to myself, but stay tuned. I'll be back in 2 more weeks with kind of an update and the next 2 weeks goals. So thanks for hanging out with me. If you want more day-to-day updates on what I'm up to, I'm most often on Instagram. I'm very often on my Instagram stories, chatting away on there, hanging out with my cats. So I'll provide lots of updates there. And I'm hoping to start doing a little bit of Big Goals, Little Steps on there too, just to provide some updates in a little bit more bite-sized way. So anyway, I appreciate you for sticking with me, and I will see you again shortly in 2 weeks. See you later, guys.